Now, every motorcycle in my humble collection reminds me of a different period of my life. This bike reminds me, and in a very, I don't know, pretty dominant way, of a time, the early 60s, when Chrysler HEMI'S were coming on vogue. And I had so many good memories of going to the drags back then. And riding this motorcycle reminds me of that time. You could watch it in 4K, adjust your device. Now, I lived through a time when muscle cars, everybody wanted a muscle car. I couldn't afford a lot of them, that's for sure, but I did have one. A 66 Chevy with a 350 horse 327. If you go back as far as I do, you know that was a cool car at the time. The Chrysler HEMI'S would go to the drags, the automatic and the stick it, duke it out. 409 Chevys. That was a wonderful time to be alive, and I remember it well because I was very involved and very interested in drag racing at the time. I guess everybody was. But when along comes the 80s, and I get the first 1000cc Suzuki, and then I get this one, I get the 82. And I think one of my initial thoughts was, after riding it, this is like a muscle car. You'd sit in a muscle car and you could feel the thumping of the engine. You could feel the power. You'd let up the clutch for a split second and oh wow, torque everywhere. What a wonderful feeling. And this bike, when you're riding it, you feel like you're in a muscle car. Now, I originally wanted one motorcycle from every 10-year period that I have been involved in motorcycling. I have 9 total, 7 registered, 4 historic. And this collection, to me, suits my needs perfectly. I get to compare an example. This bike is an '09. I get to compare it. The next day I'll ride a bike that's 44 years old. And I appreciate how really good modern bikes are. Modern bikes are just MT-09 or the Ninja. But the older bikes, the RD, the GS, the ones that are over 40 years old, they have a special feel, a special, I don't know how to describe it. If you don't know what it is, there's probably no point even mentioning it. But the way the engines make the power, the way they take the power, a modern bike is very different than a classic bike. The classic bikes with carburetors and not fuel injection, it's a whole different thing. Now, I try to keep this bike is 44 years old. I try to keep it as nice as I possibly can. I'm really a fanatic about waxing it and cleaning it and checking the air in the tires every time I ride it, over maintaining it, doing more oil and filter changes than necessary. And I'm constantly checking it and looking for something that might be rusty, might be loose. It's got upgraded brakes, a lot of polished aluminum parts, and I've put my heart and soul into it. But before I get out to ride, there's farm chores on our little farm, and feeding the fish is always one of them. And believe it or not, if you forget, they know how to get even. They look at me funny if I forget to feed them in their regular time. This is a special tree in honor of my late friend Art Thomas. I got a twig at his funeral, and it has grown into a beautiful crepe myrtle tree. And Art, we miss you dearly, of course. And I always get the latest weather from Karen. It's supposed to be cloudy today, but it's going to be a rideable day. And we want to get out on the open road and just pretend we're firing up that muscle car, and it's going to be great. Now, for every person, the memories that they have of times gone by are different. I'm sure the younger people among us now, they're going to remember their R6s or their tuner cars or their computers. I don't know. But I know what I remember. And boy, oh boy, the day I bought this bike at Westwood Suzuki and drove out, I was going down the road and I thought I was the king of New Jersey or of something. I'm not sure what. But I just was so impressed because this bike, every bike I had bought in the past was a little bit better than the one before, a little bit better, a little bit better. But this one was an absolute giant leap forward. And several of my friends had these at the time, and we'd go on group rides with all the GS's. Oh man, what memories, what memories. Now, all of the modern retro bikes, I think they're all very cool, and to be honest, I wish I could have a few in my collection, but it's something about, I don't know what it is, it's not like an elitist thing, there's something about having the real deal, a real 55 Chevy, a real Chrysler Hemi, or a real GS1100. And this bike is so comfortable, and it was so comfortable years ago, and it's still comfortable. Look at that tractor. Cool, a guy's been trying to sell that tractor for a long time. But comfortable bikes, as you get older, you want to ride them more and more. And I find myself wanting to ride this more and more. Now, another thing that's funny is after 44 years, a lot of the parts of the bike that on other bikes that I've had seem to wear out or get sloppy. The suspension on this is still wonderful. I've upgraded the brakes, steel brake lines, and thank you, Joe Padula, for donating that. Pokey got me the discs. And you can use a front disc in the back. That was Dallas's technology, and it worked perfectly. When I painted the wheels, I knew that was one of the things I wanted to just make the bike my own. And yet, even though I've done little custom touches and polishing, I want it to be immediately recognizable as a GS1100E. And one of the best things of all, the styling, which I think is just right up at the top of all the bikes ever designed, it appeals to me. I don't think it'll ever go out of style. It hasn't gone out of style yet, for sure. And I don't see 10 years from now, even 20, that it's going to go out of style. It's funny the memories you have, and I can remember my friend Roger Urban when he got his 1964 409 and sitting in that and going through the gears. It's like riding this bike. And even though both cars and motorcycles are constantly being improved, and it's hard to argue that the new cars are not safer and better, and new motorcycles, fuel injection for one, but there is a sound that comes out of that engine. There is a feel at that throttle that's just very different. In the same way, a Chrysler Hemi and a modern tuner car, they have great performance, but they feel different. There's a different feel. A big bore car with a lot of low end torque and a big bore bike, it's different. And when Suzuki decided to go big bore 1100, well, somewhere in their engineering department, I think they made the right decision. The power band is awesome. And when my wife Karen used to ride on the back of the bike, she'd ride on the back of this bike and say, "Don't even take me on those silly other bikes you have. This one is the most comfortable." And she was right. And there's something about when you ride, I don't ride with a passenger anymore, but when you ride with a passenger, having that low end torque and smooth power, linear power band, so nice, so sweet. And this is an engine that if you're so inclined to soup it up, hop it up, change the cams, do whatever, 4-into-1 exhaust, it responds great to performance. It's just a great, solid engine. Now this bike is totally stock and totally fits my needs. I love the power delivery. It is definitely, as a stock bike, I don't see a whole lot of reason to change anything. And it's one of the bikes in my collection that I've had since the day it was new, and I hope I have it right to the end, and I hope at the very end I'm able to still go through the gears with the throttle wide open. But after a really nice ride, it was a cloudy day, not much sun, didn't spoil the ride at all. It's time to get back to the farm. Take that long ride back on Route 80 and get back to the farm. Well, for a good part of this ride, I was back in the early 60s looking at Ram Charger Dodgers and 409 Chevys, and along comes the 80s and we have the muscle car bike. Boy, I just never get sick of riding this bike. I've had it since it was new. Right, by the time you see this, it'll have almost 80,000 miles on it. It's got over 79 now. And it never ever disappoints. You always have great memories and you always have a great ride. So I hope you enjoyed the video. Please hit the like button if you did, and thank you so much for watching.